very chaotic fashion in many ways.
It seems clear to me that Stravinsky's music over this period becomes progressively more savage, more biting and fierce. Is that echoed in the choreography?
Petrushka is probably the figure where this shows mostly, with the grotesque use of the body, and Nijinsky takes that one stage further in the vocabulary of the Rite of Spring.
How come you've been working on this piece together, you and Deborah?
Well, we're setting a program of Nijinsky ballets at the Rome Opera and had the opportunity to invite someone to do the chosen one. And on the basis of the work I had done with Deborah on Je, I felt that she was really an ideal Nijinsky dancer.
You tell me you thought she was a Nijinsky body, too.
Indeed, because she's very strong lower body and very small and lithe upper body and a long neck and a very good mind. And the good mind is not to be laughed at in this situation.
It really was a revelation for me, because, you know, as a composer, I'm absolutely spellbound by this piece. It was a formative piece. When you're a young person and the testosterone is beginning to get around your body, this is the equivalent in music, you know, it turns you on. And I saw these pictures of these people looking very strange and sort of these rather contorted things. I couldn't understand it.
I think what was interesting for me was to see that what positions which we might think of as crude, you know, that this kind of thing, maybe this, they can be so eloquent. These are very human positions, and they really, for me, speak volumes.
Nijinsky created this idea of counterpoint on the body, so that one figure, in a sense, is the whole story. So this idea of finding accents with one part of the body, this kind of, in a sense, dismemberment of the body and the separation of parts. Of course, it's going on in Cubist and Futurist painting at the time. It's going on, in a sense, in Stravinsky's music. But we don't expect to see the human body broken up this way.
But, you know, it is the same thing is happening in the music. This is the interesting thing, because when you think... he just adds a seventh to distort it.
It makes you shiver.
And even that famous chord is actually just two triads. But when you put them together, you get... I mean, so it is a kind of fracturing process, isn't it? A multi-layering of textures and things like that.
Fracturing is exactly the word. And of course, you know, I think Diaghilev was showing Nijinsky these pictures by Russian futurists. They were consciously fracturing images. I don't think this is an accident. Whether Nijinsky would have said, I am fracturing images, I doubt, but he was.
I found that absolutely riveting. It looked very exhausting, too.
It is exhausting. But I must say, coming out of it, I'm fascinated to see the choreographic links with Les Noces, which is going to come next. I mean, it's very clearly there. I mean, obviously, it's not Nijinsky, it's Nijinska, his sister, but you can see how she's learned and developed her style out of his.
Interesting, too, how he moved. We saw the Faubourg to begin. Fascinating how he's moved on to a kind of much more savage, abstract view of Russian life. Whereas the first was rather fairy tale-like, rather sort of comforting in some ways, with a naughty person as well, of course. But now we're getting into real life in a way, aren't we?
I think that's for me what's fascinating about Nos, to be honest, is that it's really the first time particularly that marriage is seen from what you could call a feminist point of view, or you could call it a real point of view. I mean, clearly in Nos, depends on your viewpoint, clearly in Nos, she's not that happy actually about getting married. Whereas always before in ballet, marriage or the male-female union has been seen as the ultimate thing that we all aim for, thing of Sleeping Beauty. I mean, what saves her from 100 years' sleep? The kiss of a man. Whereas in Nos, it's a very different story. And of course, if you think about it, Nijinská is really the first female choreographer to make their mark on dance. And it's, for me, it's quite interesting that that's the statement she's making.
The Royal Ballet has a very special connection with Les Noces. Back in 1966, it was revived for the company by Bronislava Nijinská herself. A quite unforgettable experience for everyone involved.
Nijinská is always in one's memory. She was an amazing lady. The first thing was she was a genius, that no question. And the work, Les Noces in particular, is a work of genius. Having said that, the woman herself and her rehearsal methods were bizarre. The first thing to be said about her was that, to our younger eyes, of course, she was ancient. She allegedly spoke 3 languages, French, Russian, and English. In fact, apparently she'd forgotten all of them. And she had this huge old hearing aid in her ear with this wire coming down, which disappeared into her blouse somewhere. And inside there was this huge sort of receiving kit. And you began to realize that if you wanted her to hear what you were saying, you more or less sort of had to bend down and talk into this rather pendulous left breast. Well, that in itself was odd.
I don't know how all of us involved in that first teaching process actually did learn anything, because Nijinská was, you know, an elderly lady then, and of a physique that was not that gifted to show. She was mostly sat on the chair. She got up and showed very small-scale arm movements and things, and somehow we took it with a process of elimination of, no, yes, this.
I do remember that she never imagined anybody needed a break, a tea break. And it was, and of course we started in this particular scene, which was girls only, and it was only when we got to the last movement, the 4th movement of Les Noces, where we had the men in with the women. And the girls quickly realized that the boys somehow seemed to have a completely different relationship with her.
Ken Mason somehow had the magic formula. She thought he was wonderful. And so she only had very few words, and sometimes when she was trying to say 3, it came out as chai, which is Russian for tea. So Kenneth, when he heard this, would say, chai, tea, ah, and everyone then went for tea. He ordered us all to go, and she would smile, and it was the only way we ever got a cup of tea was by him. And we, like most people, thought that her brother, Nijinsky, was the genius and the choreographer. But we came to realize that this was not the case. She was really the innovator. She was truly extraordinary and incredibly modern for her time.
Unlike her brother, who was interned, Bronislava Nijinská returned to Russia during the First World War.
She started up her own school for dance in Kiev, continued experimenting choreographically, using some of the notions that were afoot within early Soviet Russia, artistic movements such as constructivism. Those piles of bodies forming geometrical shapes, the powerful machine-like motion of the group.
So if we can just get into the position where you're...
Without a doubt, Nijinská is, at this point in 1923, honoring her brother. So we have, again, the use of weight and taking the body as a whole single unit. Suddenly asymmetrical things are happening, and all the weight goes to one place. Wonderful things happened with aerial steps that happened in sock as well. The knees are pulled up, these pull-up jumps. You bring the ground with you, which was the meaning in sock, and she's taking this forward.
Les Noces was the work that Stravinsky worked longest at, I suspect probably in his whole life. No other piece caused him so much trouble. To no other piece did he go back and back and back. And because the sound world that he was coming up with was so new, even for him. It took him ages to find it.
Stravinsky, I think, was always looking forward in some way or another. And I think here he was looking forward in terms of texture. And the idea of having 4 pianos and voices, this very percussive lineup, must have been completely new. It's quite difficult to do even now.
It's very stark. I mean, I get the feeling that it's not an upholstered ballet at all, is it? I mean, visually.
There's no soft cushion.
There's no soft cushions. I mean, the costumes are so stark, just brown and white. The setting, there's no colour. I was interested in here, there's an original design for the set, which is all brightly coloured. And yet, actually, it was right to pare it down, to make us see the essence of a relationship, not the padding that society puts around it.
So what one sees, really, in Stravinsky's career are these rather lush ballets earlier on, and then things become pared down, more spare, and of course there was the work of Balanchine as well, and you just find somebody who's going to the bare essentials.
I think that's right, and I think Nijinsky does that in her choreography. It's very complex rhythmically, very complex musically, but the movement, although it's stylized, is not ornate in any way. It's bare bones.
Well, I think people are making their way back. Well, there's the bell. That's we ought to be making tracks. But first of all, just remind us of the synopsis. There are 4 scenes, aren't there, in Nos?
There's 4 scenes. There's the preparation of the bride, where her plaits are prepared for the wedding.
Like in plaits you're wearing in Rugsbury?
Absolutely, the same plaits.
Yeah.
Very, very long ones. The preparation of the bridegroom, when he seeks the blessing of his parents, and that's quite a macho sort of scene. Then there's the departure of the bride from her parents' house, where there's this feeling of loss and quite touching, quite sad. And then we skip the wedding. There's no wedding scene. We see the celebrations after the wedding, and that's where we have the whole company moving with this incredible mass of bubbling energy.
I rather like the intellectual conceit of writing a piece called The Wedding and then not having the wedding, because actually it's all about what the wedding does to people.
And perhaps it says more about the wedding by not having it there.
Yeah. Right, well, we better go and catch it now.
Absolutely.
And now here's John Carew to conduct the percussionists, 4 pianists, and the soloists and chorus of the Royal Opera House in this truly extraordinary ballet.